There's a 5-letter word that most people think is a 4-letter word that every South Kitsap homeowner knows, and that most out-of-state buyers have never heard of. And that word is Gorst. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it matters and how it could completely change where you decide to buy in Kitsap County. So if you're watching this, you're probably seriously considering a move to Kitsap County, Washington. Maybe you've been looking at Port Orchard or South Kitsap. You're drawn to the affordability, the water views, the acreage, and you're thinking, how bad can traffic really be in a place like this? Well, this is the Pacific Northwest and not LA. And that's the assumption most people make. They pull up the map, they see Port Orchard to Bremerton, that's like 8 miles. They see South Kitsap to the Bremerton ferry terminal, which looks totally manageable. Small county, small traffic problem, right? Well, here's the reality. There is one intersection in Kitsap County, that's one, where 2 major state highways converge at the base of Sinclair Inlet. And when that intersection backs up, which it does every single weekday, when the shipyard gets out, it doesn't matter how close your house is to your destination. You're not going anywhere. And that intersection is Gorst. And today I'm going to show you exactly what that means for your move. I'm James Bergstrom. I'm a broker, investor, and owner of Paramount Real Estate Group right here in Kitsap County. I've been selling homes in this market for years. I know every neighborhood, every commute corridor, and honestly, I've had more conversations about Gorst traffic than I can count. Usually with buyers who called me after they already bought in South Kitsap. I don't want that to be you. So here's what we're covering today. First, I'm going to hit you with the thing that even most local agents don't talk about, the compounding effect that makes Gorst way worse than it looks on paper. Then we'll break down the geography, the actual traffic data, who it affects most, how to work around it, and what the state is doing to fix it. And I'm going to close with the single most important way Gorst should affect your home search. So let's go. And I'm starting with the one thing I have never heard another real estate video about Kitsap mention, because this is what takes Gorst from mildly annoying to could change your entire career. Most traffic analysis of Gorst treats it as a standalone problem. One intersection, one choke point. But here's what nobody tells you. The Bremerton ferry system and the Gorst corridor are on the same commute route, and their schedules are synchronized in the worst possible way. So here's exactly how this plays out in real life. The Bremerton-Seattle ferry runs roughly on an hourly schedule. When a ferry docks in Bremerton in the morning, say the 7:10 a.m. arrival from Seattle, you've got hundreds of cars that just disembarked, all heading south on Highway 3 towards Gorst. Meanwhile, at the exact same moment, your South Kitsap neighbors are in their cars, pushing north through Gorst, trying to get to the Bremerton to catch the morning ferry to Seattle. You've got 2 opposing high volume traffic flows hitting the exact same single lane choke point simultaneously. One from the north, one from the south, at the same time every single morning. This is why Gorst isn't just a commute problem, it's an ecosystem problem. The ferry schedule, the naval base gets reporting times, morning school runs, shift changes at the hospital, they all funnel through the same corridor in the same time window. Understanding this is how you think about Kitsap traffic like a local instead of like someone who just pulled up Google Maps and said, yep, 12 miles, that's fine. So now that you know why it compounds, let me give you the actual geography, because this is critical for understanding why this thing is so hard to fix. Gorst is a small unincorporated community at the southern tip of Sinclair Inlet. It is the only place where Highway 3, coming from Bremerton and Silverdale, and Highway 16, coming from Gig Harbor and Tacoma, merge into one corridor. There is water on 3 sides. There is no alternate route at that junction. You go through Gorst or you don't go. Think of it like an hourglass. Every moving north and south through Kitsap, everything moving east and west between Gig Harbor and Bremerton has to squeeze through one narrow point at the base of an inlet. If there's an accident on Highway 3 or Highway 16 near Gorst, and accidents do happen, the entire county's traffic grid locks up. Not slows down, locks up. I've had clients tell me they missed a ferry because of a fender bender at Gorst. And I've had buyers turn around and go back home because the backup stretched 2 miles and wasn't moving. Those highways were not designed for this volume of traffic, and WSDOT acknowledges it. The fact that it still exists in its current form isn't because no one noticed. It's because the geography makes it genuinely complicated and expensive to fix. We'll get to what's in the works, but first, let's talk numbers. Let's put real numbers on this, because this is where the map stops being abstract and starts being personal. WSDOT data shows that the morning commute through the Gorst corridor sees a 58% increase in travel time between Port Orchard and Bremerton during peak hours. That's a trip that normally takes 15 minutes, but takes over 23 minutes on average at peak. And that's the average. On bad days during incidents, we're talking 45 minutes to an hour for that same stretch. The afternoon commute southbound shows a 37% increase during peak hours. Here's how to make this practical. If you're buying in Port Orchard and commuting to Bremerton Naval Base every day, you need to plan for your 12-mile commute to routinely take between 45 minutes and an hour during peak windows. That's not a worst-case scenario, that's Tuesday. Multiply that over a year of work days and you are adding over 100 hours of additional commute time to your life annually that you did not budget for when you were looking at houses on Zillow. And that doesn't count the days when there is a crash. This is exactly why I always ask buyers the same two questions up front. What time do you leave for work? And what time do you come home? Because the answer changes where we look for homes. A buyer who starts work at 6 a.m. has a completely different Gorst experience than someone who, say, commutes at 8:30. Same house, same commute route, completely different life. Not everyone in Kitsap is equally affected by Gorst, and this is where your neighborhood choice really starts to matter. Gorst impacts South Kitsap residents the most. Port Orchard, Olalla, Burley, the rural stretches of South Kitsap. So if your daily commute requires you to pass through or near Gorst, you're in the impact zone. North Kitsap, Silverdale, Paulsville, Kingston sits largely above the choke point geographically. Residents there can access Bremerton, the Bangor Naval Base, and the ferry system without touching Gorst on a typical day. Here's something the market already knows, even if buyers don't. There's often a price differential between South Kitsap and Central or North Kitsap that doesn't fully make sense on paper when you compare square footage and lot sizes. South Kitsap is more affordable, yet you get more house, more land, sometimes waterfront properties at prices that look incredible compared to Paulsville or Silverdale. But built into that affordability, whether buyers realize it or not, is what I call the Gorst tax. The market is priced in the inconvenience. It's not a flaw in the market, it's the market being irrational. This is not a reason to avoid South Kitsap, because people love it down here. The community, the waterfront lifestyle, the acreage, the value, but you need to buy South Kitsap with clear eyes, which means before you make an offer on a house in Port Orchard, you need to actually drive that commute. Drive it yourself at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, because the open house visit on a Sunday afternoon at noon will tell you absolutely nothing about what your life will look like on a Wednesday morning in February. So if you're committed to South Kitsap, or you just have to pass through Gorst regularly, what can you actually do? Because there are legitimate strategies that locals use. The most powerful tool you have against Gorst is timing. The worst windows are 7 to 9 a.m. northbound and 4 to 6 p.m. southbound on weekdays. Outside those windows, Gorst is usually totally manageable. Many South Kitsap residents have structured their professional lives around this reality. Earlier start times, flex schedules, remote work days. Here are the specific moves that work. First, if you're military and you have any flexibility with your gate reporting window, this is genuinely worth a conversation with your chain of command. Shifting your start by even 30 to 45 minutes can take you out of the worst of it altogether. Second, avoid Gorst on Friday afternoons between 3 and 6 p.m. That is the single worst traffic window of the entire week. Third, if there's an incident near Gorst, check the WSDOT app before you leave. Google Maps surface street reroutes usually don't help and can make it worse. Fourth, if your commute is primarily west toward the Olympic Peninsula, or you work remotely full-time, Gorst may be nearly irrelevant to your daily life. That changes the entire calculus. The people who thrive in South Kitsap are the people who adapted to Gorst instead of fighting it. It becomes habit. You build your morning around it, but you have to go in knowing that this adaptation is part of the lifestyle. By the way, if you're doing serious research on a Kitsap move, I put together a free Washington State relocation guide that covers a lot of what out-of-state buyers wish they'd known before making the move. Stuff exactly like this. It's linked in the description below. Just grab it and use it. Here's the question I get almost every time I bring up Gorst with a buyer. Aren't they fixing that? And the honest answer is, well, sort of. Eventually, maybe. Let me give you the real story. There is active planning happening. WSDOT has received $82.5 million for a planning and environmental linkages study of the Highway 3 Gorst corridor. 4 alternatives are on the table. Alternative A, widen Highway 3 to 3 lanes. Alternative B, a bridge bypass across Sinclair Inlet. Alternative C, a full replacement bridge with 3 lanes in each direction. Alternative D, a land bypass with the elevated roadway through the Gorst commercial area. These are all real options being seriously evaluated. That part is true. Here's the timeline reality, and WSDOT plans to complete evaluation of these alternatives in early 2026. The full planning and environmental linkages report is targeted for October 2026. After that, the National Environmental Policy Act phase begins. WSDOT anticipates starting the process in 2027. Construction, we're talking a decade away at minimum. And in the meantime, this is important. A separate fish barrier removal project is launching in spring of 2026 that will add construction delays in and around the Gorst area for a period. So in the short term, it actually gets slightly worse before any improvement. The rumor that they're fixing Gorst soon is one of the most persistent half-truths in this market. They are studying fixing Gorst. Well, that is different. If you are buying a home you plan to live in for the next 3 to 5 years, Gorst on your move-out day will look almost identical to what it looks like on your move-in day. That is the honest truth, and you deserve to know it before you sign. This is the one that changes how you actually shop for a house. And it's what I walk every single South Kitsap buyer I work with through before we even open escrow. Gorst is what I call a geographic sorting mechanism. It doesn't make South Kitsap a bad place to live. What it does is create a very specific trade-off between South Kitsap and the rest of the county. And when you understand that trade-off with clarity, you can make a home purchase decision you feel great about instead of one you'll quietly resent for years. Here is the framework I use with my buyers. Step 1, map your commute before you map your search. Before you start saving listings and figure out exactly where you're going every day, what time you leave and whether that route passes through or near Gorst in South Kitsap. You're being compensated for the inconvenience in the form of lower prices. Know specifically what that compensation is worth to you. Is an extra $75,000 in buying power worth a longer commute? For some people, absolutely yes. For others, the daily friction erodes the value completely. Neither answer is wrong, but you need to have it before you make an offer. Step 2, if your commute is primarily west towards the Olympic Peninsula ferry routes, or you work remotely full-time, Gorst may be nearly irrelevant to your daily life. That is a completely different conversation, and in that case, South Kitsap may be one of the best value moves available to you in the entire Pacific Northwest, and I mean that genuinely. I love it here. Step 3, visit at peak commute times before you make an offer. This is a non-negotiable. I will literally drive the commute route with my buyers before we write an offer, because what looks perfect on Saturday at noon needs to feel acceptable on a Wednesday at 7:45 a.m. Those are 2 completely different experiences of the same address. The buyers who struggle in South Kitsap are the ones who discovered Gorst after closing. The buyers who love it there are the ones who knew about it, tested it, decided the trade-off was worth it for them, and bought with full confidence. My whole job is to make sure you're the second kind of buyer. All right, let's bring this home. Here's what you know now that most Kitsap buyers don't know when they start their search. Gorst is a single point choke point where Highway 3 and Highway 16 meet at the base of Sinclair Inlet. Water on 3 sides, no alternate route. The morning commute is 58% longer at peak hours than off-peak. The ferry Gorst double bottleneck creates a compounding effect that most real estate content completely ignores. South Kitsap feels the impact most, but the market has priced that in, which is exactly why the values are so strong down there. The state has $82.5 million for a planning study, but construction is realistically a decade away. And the spring 2026 fish barrier project is adding short-term construction delays near Gorst. You came into this video probably thinking Kitsap traffic was a non-issue, and for a lot of Kitsap that is still true. North Kitsap, Central Kitsap, largely untouched by this, but for South Kitsap specifically, you now know the right questions to ask, the commute to test, and how to weigh it against the real value you get in the part of the county. Well, if this video gave you more than you expected when you clicked, if you feel like you got genuine insider intel today, the kind most agents won't share because it might complicate the sale, that is exactly what this channel is built for. I'm not here to sell you on Kitsap County. I'm here to make sure that if you choose Kitsap, you choose it knowing exactly where you're choosing. If you're at that point where you're seriously weighing neighborhoods, South Kitsap versus Silverdale versus Paulsbo, I do free strategy conversations, not a sales pitch, not a listing presentation, just a real conversation where we map your commute, your budget, and your lifestyle against what actually is available in the market right now. Links in the description if you want to grab some time. And if you haven't grabbed the Washington State Relocation Guide quite yet, it's linked below. Built specifically for people doing exactly what you're doing right now, which is serious research on a Pacific Northwest move. If you want more of this real unfiltered content about living in Kitsap County, please subscribe. I put out a new video every week, and drop a comment below with a topic you want me to cover next. I read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time.